If you grew up playing classic platformers in the late 90s, there's a good chance you remember the magic of Captain Claw, that fast-paced pirate adventure, packed with treasure, traps, cannons, and razor-sharp platforming, became a cult classic for PC gamers. For years, it felt like one of those games locked in the past, stuck behind compatibility issues, old CDs, and outdated operating systems. But today, something incredible is happening. OpenClaw on Linux is not just working, it's thriving. And the best part? You don't need a high-end machine, you don't need a Mac Mini, and you definitely don't need to be a Linux expert. In this video, we're diving deep into how OpenClaw works on Linux, how beginners can set it up step by step, and why this might be the most fun you'll have reviving a retro game in 2026. Let's start with the big question. What is OpenClaw? OpenClaw is an open-source re-implementation of the original Captain Claw engine. That means it's not just an emulator. It's a complete rebuild of the game engine designed to run natively on modern systems. Instead of forcing the original Windows 95 executable to somehow behave on a modern operating system, OpenClaw uses modern libraries and tools while reading the original game data files. The result is smoother performance, better compatibility, improved stability, and support for modern hardware. On Linux, this is especially exciting because it removes the dependency on compatibility layers for basic gameplay. For years, many Linux users relied on Wine to run old Windows games. And while Wine has come a long way, it can still be inconsistent, especially with older DirectX titles. OpenClaw removes that headache. It speaks Linux natively. It integrates cleanly with your system. It launches like any other Linux application. That's why so many people are calling it wild. It feels almost illegal how smooth it is. Now let's talk about hardware. There's this myth that you need powerful hardware or something fancy like a Mac Mini from Apple running a compatibility layer, just to enjoy retro games. That's not true here. OpenClaw runs beautifully on modest Linux systems. If you have a dual-core processor from the last decade and at least 4 GB of RAM, you're already more than prepared. Integrated graphics are perfectly fine. This is a 2D platformer from the 90s. Modern systems barely break a sweat running it. Even lightweight Linux distributions handle it effortlessly. Before we jump into setup, let's understand what you actually need. First, you need Linux installed. That could be Ubuntu, Linux Mint, Fedora, Arch, or any other modern distribution. Second, you need the original game data files from Captain Claw. OpenClaw does not ship with copyrighted assets. So you'll need the data files from your original CD, a legal digital copy, or a backup you already own. Third, you need OpenClaw itself, which is available as source code and often as pre-built binaries depending on your distribution. For beginners, the easiest path is using pre-built packages if they're available in your distro's repositories. Some distributions include OpenClaw directly in their community repositories. On Debian-based systems, you might find it in a PPA or through manual installation of a .deb package. On Arch-based systems, the AUR usually has it ready to go. The beauty of Linux is flexibility. But don't worry, you don't need to compile from source unless you want to. Let's imagine you're on Ubuntu. You open your terminal. That might sound intimidating, but it's just a powerful launcher. You update your package list, search for OpenClaw, and install it if available. If it's not in your main repository, you download the release from the official project page and follow the provided instructions. Most of the time, installation is as simple as extracting an archive and running a binary. Now here's where things get exciting. Once OpenClaw is installed, you copy your original game data files into the directory OpenClaw expects. Typically, that means placing the Claw data folder into the OpenClaw directory or pointing the application to it during first launch. Some versions auto-detect the files, others prompt you for the path. Either way, it's straightforward. The first time you launch OpenClaw on Linux, you'll probably feel a moment of disbelief. The game loads instantly. No Windows splash screen. No compatibility errors. No resolution glitches. It just works, audio plays correctly. Full screen mode behaves properly. Alt-tabbing doesn't break anything. It feels native because it is. Performance is where things get truly wild. Frame pacing is smooth. Input latency is minimal. If you connect a controller, it's recognized immediately thanks to Linux's modern input systems. Keyboard remapping works. Resolution scaling works. Some builds even support widescreen adjustments. Compare that to struggling with old DirectDraw wrappers on Windows, and you start to see why this is such a big deal. Another powerful aspect of OpenClaw is its cross-platform consistency. If you're someone who uses multiple systems, maybe a Linux desktop and a laptop, you can copy your save files easily. No registry edits. No hidden app data folders buried in strange directories. Linux keeps things clean and transparent. Your configuration files are typically in a simple directory under your home folder. Let's address a fear beginners often have. What if I break something? The answer is simple. Linux is surprisingly forgiving. If OpenClaw doesn't launch because of missing dependencies, your package manager usually tells you exactly what's missing. Installing dependencies is often one command away. Unlike older Windows setups where DLL errors felt cryptic and terrifying, Linux gives you readable feedback. Now let's talk about compiling from source, because some viewers love learning the deeper side. OpenClaw's source code is hosted publicly. If you want the absolute latest version, you can clone the repository. You install development dependencies like SDL, CMake, and required libraries. You run a build command, and within minutes, you have a fresh binary tailored to your system. It sounds complicated, but modern build tools simplify the process dramatically. And when it finishes successfully, there's a real sense of accomplishment. Graphics scaling is another area where OpenClaw shines. On modern high-resolution monitors, the original game can look tiny or blurry. OpenClaw often supports integer scaling, preserving pixel sharpness. That means crisp sprites without distortion. On a 108OP or 144OP display, the game looks vibrant and clean, not stretched or smeared. Audio improvements are subtle but important. Linux's modern audio stack ensures stable playback. No crackling. No weird MIDI issues, sound effects remain punchy, music plays consistently. If you use Bluetooth headphones, it just works. That's something that wasn't guaranteed with older compatibility methods. Let's talk about customization. Because OpenClaw is open source, it opens the door to community enhancements. Some builds experiment with additional configuration options, debugging tools, or performance tweaks. You're not locked into a black box. If something bothers you, there's a chance you can tweak it or request improvements from the community. For beginners who have never gamed on Linux before, this experience can be transformative. There's a stereotype that Linux is only for programmers, but setting up OpenClaw proves otherwise. It's approachable, it's smooth, it feels modern. And once you get comfortable installing one game like this, you start realizing how much the Linux gaming ecosystem has matured. Another thing worth mentioning is system resource usage. OpenClaw barely touches your CPU. On many systems, it runs at just a few % utilization. That means your computer stays cool and quiet, fans don't ramp up. Battery life on laptops remains solid. You can play for hours without worrying about thermal throttling. Let's imagine someone switching from Windows to Linux specifically to escape bloat. They install a lightweight desktop environment. They set up OpenClaw. Suddenly, their old laptop feels reborn. Fast boot times, instant application launches. Retro gaming without overhead. It's almost poetic. There's also something deeply satisfying about running a childhood favorite in a fully open ecosystem. You're not depending on outdated proprietary drivers. You're not fighting forced updates. You control your environment. That freedom resonates with a lot of people in 2026. Now, troubleshooting. If OpenClaw doesn't detect your game files, double-check the directory structure. The data files must remain intact. Don't rename internal folders. Ensure file permissions allow reading. On Linux, permissions matter. But fixing them is easy. A simple command command can resolve access issues. If you experience graphical glitches, ensure your GPU drivers are properly installed. Most modern distributions handle this automatically. Integrated Intel graphics usually work out of the box. AMD and NVIDIA may require selecting the recommended driver in your system settings. Once drivers are correct, OpenClaw runs flawlessly. Controller configuration deserves its own moment. Plug in a USB controller. Linux detects it. OpenClaw maps it. If button mapping feels off, open the settings and rebind controls. The flexibility is refreshing. You're not stuck editing obscure config files unless you want to. Let's talk about multiplayer or community aspects. While the original game is single-player, the OpenClaw community often shares mods, custom levels, and speedrunning techniques. Running the game on Linux doesn't isolate you. It connects you with enthusiasts who appreciate preservation and performance. One of the most surprising aspects for beginners is how fast everything feels. Launch time is almost instant. No heavy launcher, no DRM handshake, just click and play. That simplicity feels rebellious in an era dominated by bloated clients. Security is another bonus. Linux systems are generally less targeted by malware. Running OpenClaw natively reduces exposure to shady third-party patches. You're not downloading mysterious DLL replacements from random forums. You're using a transparent, community-driven engine. Let's reflect on the emotional side. Revisiting Captain Claw through OpenClaw on Linux isn't just about technology. It's about nostalgia meeting modern freedom. It's about reclaiming a piece of gaming history and running it better than ever before. For absolute beginners, here's the summary woven into one clear thought. Install Linux. Install OpenClaw from your repository or build it. Copy your original game data. Launch. Play. That's it. No Mac Mini required. No expensive hardware. No complicated emulation chains. And once you succeed with this setup, you'll realize something bigger. Linux gaming in 2026 isn't a niche experiment anymore. It's practical, it's polished, it's accessible. OpenClaw is proof of that transformation. The wild part isn't just that it works. It's how effortless it feels. A once fragile retro experience now runs smoother than it ever did on its original hardware. That's the power of open source combined with a mature operating system. So if you've been sitting on the fence, thinking Linux might be too technical, let this be your gateway. Start with something fun. Start with something nostalgic. Start with OpenClaw. You might come for the pirate adventure, but you'll stay for the freedom. And that's why OpenClaw on Linux is wild. Not because it's complicated, not because it requires cutting-edge hardware, but because it proves that gaming history can live on beautifully and effortlessly in an open world where you're in control.